Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to USTA Florida's Here to Serve podcast. My name is Laura Bowen, and I'm the Executive Director at USTA Florida. It's mid-September, and here in Florida, that means it's time to celebrate Hispanic heritage. I'm especially delighted today to have two of my favorite people joining me for the podcast to talk more about the importance of Hispanic Heritage Month and how we can best celebrate all of the cultures that are represented in the state of Florida. First up, I have Marcelo Gouts. Marcelo is currently the treasurer on USTA Florida's board of directors. He also is the owner of MG Tennis, where he manages Lake Kane Tennis Center here in Central Florida. Welcome back to the podcast, Marcelo.
Thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure being here.
Joining Marcelo and I today is Carlos Perez. Carlos is the founder and owner of Perez Technologies, which is an IT consulting firm also based here in Central Florida. And Carlos has been our IT technology partner for almost 5 years. And I'm proud to say he is a friend of mine. So welcome to the podcast, Carlos. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Laura.
So my first question, usually when I start the podcast, I ask people to share their tennis story, but I'm not going to do that today. I actually would love for each of you to maybe share a little bit of your own Hispanic heritage and how each of you came to be part of our multicultural community here in Central Florida. And Marcelo, I'd like to start with you.
Thank you, Laura. As many of you know, I'm original from Argentina, and when I came here as a young player looking for opportunities to play, I reached out to the community and tried to kind of find new friends. And although tennis was the common denominator, my first greeters were of Hispanic community. But they opened the doors. They invited me to play. They networked me. They were my welcome wagon here in Central Florida. And because of that, I was able to kind of network myself into different opportunities to play, to teach, because at that time I was trying to discover that I also wanted to coach. And, I seen this community grow from then on. So for me, it was very, very important just to kind of come here to Central Florida and find open doors. People that I could say, hey, you know what, I could speak to you in Spanish, this is where you go. But then after a while, then we all got together and play. And it was about just meeting other players in the community. But it was quite important for me to have that welcome wagon.
That's great. And I know you are now that welcome wagon for many people who come to Central Florida. So you've paid it forward,
Thank you.
Many, many times over. So thank you. We're very, very blessed to have you. Carlos, can you share a little bit about your heritage and maybe how you came to be part of the community here in Central Florida?
Sure. So I'm originally from Puerto Rico. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico and eventually moved to the Northeast in Connecticut. And as I was working for Accenture and Microsoft, I decided that I wanted to start my own managed IT and cybersecurity firm and decided to move to Central Florida. One of my very first experiences having moved to Central Florida was the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Central Florida here in Orlando. And they kind of welcomed me with open arms. And the Hispanic business community here is really thriving. It's growing. And there's a lot of forward-thinking individuals in that community that kind of see that growth and are wanting to kind of grab it by the horns. And I saw a community that I had never really had the experience of seeing as a business owner. And so that really, really motivated me as an entrepreneur to think this is possible, right? This is possible. The opportunities exist. And I know that's true because I can see it in front of me, right? And I can see a lot of these people that I look up to today, and who are in front of me, and who are running very, very successful businesses, right? And have kind of shown me the way and shown me that path. And the longer I stayed in this community and the longer I started to be in it and get more and more involved, it became evidently clear that there are so many people here who want to see you succeed, particularly in the Hispanic community, and want to share those experiences with you, and really want to see everyone kind of grow this community together, right? And that was very, very special for me because it was new.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the Hispanic Chamber. Shout out to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce here, particularly in Central Florida, for anyone who has a business that really is looking for information on how to reach out to the Hispanic community or just in general the demographics. They do an outstanding job of providing information, support, networking. So I'm really glad that you mentioned them, and certainly want to give them a shout out here on the podcast. We've really used a lot of the information and data that they've prepared to help us do a better job of reaching out to the Hispanic community. So they do great work.
Yes, they do, and we are proud members.
Yes, thank you. So, the stories that each of you shared about, how you came to Central Florida really show us in a lot of ways how diverse and multidimensional the Hispanic community is. It's not one thing or one country or one location. How important is it for us to recognize the different cultures and experiences within our Florida community? And Carlos, I thought I'd start with you this time.
Sure, I think it's very, very important to understand that Hispanics are very multidimensional. Our cultural experiences are very different, and in Latin America, we first and foremost identify with our country of origin, right? As Hispanics, we have a lot of common fabric that ties us together, common experiences that tie us together, and we are very, very close with each other as countries. But we start that path, right, and that journey really through our own cultural experiences in our own countries. And when we bring that to a place like Central Florida that is so diverse, and we're able to kind of see a lot of other, of the very same experiences coming from other countries, we can relate, right? And I think that sports a lot of times bring us together in that sense, because it's a very, very common interest that we all really share, particularly in Latin America. And bringing those cultures together really, really has a very dynamic impact on the community that we are now a part of, right? And we are now trying to develop and bring up. And really acknowledging those experiences is very important, because the experiences are really what make us who we are, right? And it's what we bring to work every day. It's what we bring to our family. It's what we bring to our friends. It's what we bring to our communities. Those experiences really shape us, right? As professionals, as people. And I think that it's very, very important to acknowledge that they are very different. And that's something that at times can be viewed as something negative. I think it should always be viewed as something positive, right? We all bring something to the table that is significantly different, yet for some reason we're still very, very tied together. I know that in the United States we tend to be grouped in as Hispanics, and that's okay for the most part, but it gets significantly more granular than that, and I think those things are very, very important.
Yeah, that's a great point, because even though we do talk about Hispanic heritage, you're really talking about heritage being somewhat unique to each country, and then experiences being very diverse across those countries. So while there are commonalities, there are also really important differences to be respectful, and to also appreciate. Marcelo, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Obviously, being from South America, and there's many, many different cultures in South America, for sure. So, how important is it for us to recognize those different cultures here in our Central Florida community?
I think it's very important and is the right thing to do. And as Carlos mentioned, we different. We need to pay attention to each area. We do have the benefit of having a sport that connects us all together, which is tennis. And I have a lot of fun just making those connections. So that brings me the most reward these days, to kind of be able to kind of put friends to play together, and seeing how they all come to be part of this community. I see families that move here and the children are very young and they don't speak any English. And I start talking with them in Spanish and they're like isolated a little bit, but then within a few months, you start seeing these children speaking English again. And I have fun a lot of times just going out to them and say, hey, you forgot to speak Spanish now, huh? You only speak English. And it just kind of brings me a lot of joy because now I see those children try fully integrated, fully playing tennis. And they do have that heritage with them. They'll never forget where they came from. But they also will never forget that tennis is what connect the dots for them and open the doors. And for us to kind of be able to have the opportunity to be a witness and a vehicle for that, it is a lot of joy. And because tennis is our tool, our vehicle, for us to recognize it, to ask for celebrate it, is an amazing thing. So thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah, and that experience really resonates with me. I remember I think we did an adult beginner program with you years ago, and I remember these two ladies came in and saw me at the desk and didn't even come to the desk. They were sort of wandering around and we're like, come on, you can play. And they're like, no, 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 no. I think they didn't have shoes. And here comes Marcelo out, like just getting off the court, passes by these ladies, starts to speak to them in Spanish. Oh, they went home and got their shoes and came back. And I think, again, going back to what you said earlier, is being that welcome wagon and really embracing people from all different communities. You've done that so well, and it's been wonderful to watch you work and how that's happened over many, many years.
Right, and give us a sense of where we're always standing up because we need to know our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I'm going to shift a little bit here. You are both also business owners in Central Florida. We talked about that earlier. And so I kind of would like you to put your business owner hat on just a little bit. And can you share a little bit about how much the Hispanic community has grown over the last several years, and maybe how that growth has impacted you, either personally or in your business? And Marcelo, I'll start with you this time.
Well, it's definitely real. The growth of tennis that we had over the last couple of years is there. It's just not just statistics and numbers. As people are showing up with a racket, they want to play, they want to participate in tennis, and we have the responsibility to be part of that growth and inclusive of all that growth. So a lot of times, families come in, they need a little bit more extra attention because of their language. So being able to talk to them and be patient, and a lot of times it's like, oh, habla español. And it's not one day that I show up where somebody is asking be assistant Spanish. And we do have many of our employees are Spanish speakers, so we're able to kind of pass the message through. But it has grown dramatically, and it's a good problem to have. But it's not only families that come from Spanish-speaking countries. Our Brazilian community has grown tremendously here in Central Florida, and a lot of times we find ourselves trying to speak a little bit of Portuguese. But back again, we actually are part of that welcome wagon, and I'm very happy to be part of that process.
Carlos, from your perspective, you work with a lot of businesses in Central Florida. How has the Hispanic community grown here over the last several years, and has that affected you similar to the way Marcelo's saying, where you're starting to see that a lot of employees and customers and the need to be bilingual or just interact more with people from all over the country and from different communities? Is that what you're seeing as well?
We are. We've definitely seen the growth of businesses in Central Florida and significantly in general, but the Hispanic community has kind of led the way, right? The statistics reflect that in the entire country, and Central Florida has led the way in that. And I think that that's very, very important. When we connect with business owners that are coming from Latin America into the United States, we learn several things, right? Speaking Spanish is certainly a huge advantage when it comes to doing business with anyone from Latin America. But I think that connecting with them culturally is a very, very powerful tool, because we are able to really understand them and understand what their motives are, and also understand that they are very much invested in integrating into the overall business community, right? When we're in the United States, we want to participate in the business community as a whole. We really do want to bring our grain of salt and more importantly, our value to customers in the United States. And that perspective of how things do work in Latin America, I think, is incredibly useful, because in Latin American countries, owning businesses is actually very, very common. It's something that is very, very instilled in us, right? The idea of corporate jobs is a concept that to many Latin Americans is kind of foreign, right? So much of my family and my friends' families, or my fiance's family, they were all business owners. It was just a way of life for them, right? Supplying for the family always came through the concept of, well, I own a business, I sell a product or a good, and that will get me to, being able to support my family. Bringing a lot of those mindsets to the U.S., I think, is really a part of why we've seen the Hispanic business community grow and develop the way that it has. And Central Florida is very, very key in that, I think, to Marcelo's point about how we're seeing so many more people coming from Latin America. And a lot of these businesses are making Florida, and even Central Florida, their home. And I think that that's very special. And we, again, I think that making that cultural connection with these businesses is very important, because it allows us to really understand what it is that their motive is when they're here. And like I said, the sense that we've always gotten is integrating into the overall business community and being able to bring a different perspective of growth, and the corporate cultures are significantly different in other places. That doesn't necessarily mean better or worse, but in many cases, I think that there's so much that we can learn and we can take from these cultures, and these these kind of corporate cultures and corporate ideas on building a business, developing a business. And a great example of that is kind of how we think of running businesses in a very international way, right? The people from Argentina will do business with someone from Chile, country to country, right next door, right? And a lot of the times, you kind of see that in Europe as well, where people view themselves as this, the same way that in the United States, someone from Florida would do business with someone from Texas and not think about it, right? But if the minute they have to go beyond the borders, it becomes whoa, do I really want to go international? It's like, well, in a lot of our countries, we don't really even consider that concept. We just, we want to do business.
Right. You both talked a lot about the idea of community, and I think that's really sort of a key theme that has come out here, is the idea of community and how much that's valued, and how important it is to be part of a community, whether it's being part of a broader business community or being part of the tennis community. That feeling of I'm part of something bigger than myself, which really drives a lot of us in many ways, but in particular, I think it's something that's important. And that was a great perspective you shared, Carlos, is that the meaning of community from a Hispanic perspective can be very, very multicultural, international, and very viewed very much in a broader sense. So thank you both for really hitting on that idea of community, because I think that's really where we sit as USTA Florida, and where we try to shine, which is to create this multifaceted community of players. And we really have a great opportunity to kind of serve that up. That gets to my next question, which is, tennis is really such an international sport. There have been many, many great Hispanic and Latin champions. I know, Marcelo, we were just talking about Juan Martin. And obviously we have Monica Puig and, others who've really shined. And of course, we just celebrated a new Grand Slam champion from Spain last weekend. So my question to each of you is, what impact does it have on the younger generations in Florida to see themselves at the highest levels of our sport? And I'm going to throw a curveball, and Carlos, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Sounds good. To your point about community, it really does speak to why a sport like tennis is international, right? And it's because we really, we really do view it that way. My very first experience with tennis, I always kind of knew what tennis was. My very first experience with tennis was Monica Puig winning the gold medal, because she really brought Puerto Rico behind her, right? Where it's in at least in Puerto Rico, tennis has always been thought of as a very affluent sport, right? Affluent people play tennis. Not everyone really plays tennis, and it was a very intimidating thing to see. I think Monica, to a certain extent, really shattered that, right? She shattered that glass for a lot of people, and they saw themselves in her. And to see her, yield the gold medal and win Puerto Rico's first gold medal was incredibly special, because everyone kind of rallied behind her and saw themselves in her. I can't imagine the number of young girls in Puerto Rico who picked up a tennis racket because of her. And they said, Mom, I want those sneakers she's wearing. I want to hit the ball the way she's hitting. I want to reach that level because I can see it. She's there. She's winning it. And I'd like to see that. I kind of seeing themselves in that was very, very important, right? I can relate to that point because I was just speaking earlier, and I believe it was the first question that you asked about being a business owner. And for me, seeing Hispanic business owners thriving and succeeding, building successful businesses, really inspired me to see it in myself and say, hey, these guys are doing that, right? I have a marketing agency from Colombia. I work with many other businesses that are from Latin America, and I see these people. I look up to these people, and they really inspired me to become a business owner. And I think that a lot of people, especially young girls in Puerto Rico, really were inspired by Monica, because she was winning at a level that, at least in Puerto Rico, we had really, I mean, we've never had a gold medal before. That was a one gold medal, and she really did bring that younger generation along. So, and I think the impacts of that may not even be seen yet, right? Those girls may still be coming through programs like USTA Florida, and when they do reach a level of national and international notoriety, it's going to become evidently clear when these girls are winning Grand Slams, and someone asks them, well, how did you get to this point where they're going to go, remember Monica Puig 15, 20 years ago? And then it's going to come to light.
I hear that all the time, to be honest. I was mentioning that to you the other day. Is everyone in tennis knows who Monica Puig is. Everybody. She is such a key figure in tennis and in tennis history that everyone knows who she is. And I will tell you that anytime I have any type of meeting with anyone from the Hispanic Chamber to a company that serves the Hispanic market, they will always ask the same question: is, can you bring Monica Puig out? Like, that's probably like the number one question I get asked when we're doing events. And but I knew who she was long before I came here, and I think that her status in the tennis community is really almost second to none. It's incredible what she's done, and I'm really glad that you mentioned her, because it's really an important note in terms of representation, and particularly for young girls playing sport.
Certainly.
Marcel, I'm interested in your perspective on this. Obviously, you have more tennis history than either of us do. And what impact do you see it having on the younger generations to see players from all over the world, and particularly from Latin countries, at the highest level of the game?
Yeah, is extremely significant. I think it has a huge impact, as it is for me when I was growing up, and I saw this, upcoming young player from Argentina. His name was Guillermo Vilas, and was the bull of La Pampas. That's what they call it. Very strong guy. Just making his way up and making news. And all of a sudden, everybody was on the tennis court playing with a headband and wristbands, and nobody knew how to play, but we all wanted to be like Vilas. So as that was inspirational for me, I know that all these players coming up will influence the next generation of players that are seeing themselves or dreaming on that place, and all you had to do is just kind of go and see these kids coming into the court, and they're all going to be, just really talking about what happened this weekend and how Carlos is now on top of the, tennis world. And we're going to hear a lot of vamos every time. Just everybody wanted to emulate. And that's how, it's the inspiration will help generations to come and be the next leader of our sport. But very influential as it did for me and different generations. And as we talk about the diversity, it's always good to know and ask that question when the players come: who did they get inspired by? Because who inspired them to play? And that is always fun to kind of find out how they came about it and who their tennis heroes were growing up.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of Rafas over the years, and now I'm curious to see how many Carlitos we see coming out to the courts after this past weekend. It will be fun to see that and to watch that develop over the next generations. Super talented and super young, and looks like he'll be on that main stage for quite some time. Last question for both of you. What is the best and perhaps even the most important way that we as USTA Florida can continue to celebrate Hispanic heritage all year long? So we have a month dedicated, September 15th to October 15th, but what can we do to do this better all year long and really celebrate the rich Hispanic heritage that is present here in Florida? And it's an open question, so either one of you jump in.
I'd like to say that for me is identifying and thanking the ambassadors that come to the game and take leadership in trying to kind of promote our sport, and they're huge contributors to engaging the community into play. And when I see him, I thank him very much. I'm trying to open the doors. I encourage him to continue doing that. But I would like to start celebrating them more by either become, Hispanic Ambassador of the Month.
Okay.
Yes, on top of mentioning that, we'll be able to kind of say, hey, we recognize what you're doing. That you're doing perfectly and you're trying to kind of build the community as a whole. But I know of your Hispanic heritage, and we want to celebrate that with you today.
Well, great idea. Carlos, what else do you think we can do to celebrate Hispanic heritage all year long?
I think I certainly do think that USTA Florida does a great job in representing and really celebrating the Hispanic community. I think it's very important to keep in mind that as Hispanics, we are part of the American fabric, right? We really do see ourselves as Americans in many cases. We don't ever relinquish really our identity. We really do still believe of ourselves as, Puerto Ricans or Argentinians, Colombians, etc. But we really do see ourselves as a part of the fabric of America, because we are Hispanics, but we do see ourselves as Americans. Our values very much align with those of Americans. We want a lot of the very same things. We desire a lot of the very same things. We send our kids to the very same tennis camps. We send our kids to, we want them to play in these tournaments. We want them to really thrive. We want them to have great educations, build great businesses, really participate in the community and grow, right? When we first come to this country, I think through my parents' story, what was it that they were trying to accomplish, right? And the more that I speak to them and I see, why we came here, it becomes evident as to why the story exists and why, and really what our future really should be. And I think that the legacy of our parents is probably the biggest strength that we have, and what we really bring to certainly to a sport like tennis, certainly to your community as a whole, is that those motivations that our parents brought with them and those dreams, they really live through the younger generations like myself and even my children, to really grab life by the horns, but really identify the fact that we as Hispanics are a very big part of the American culture. And when you have a Hispanic neighbor, it's fairly safe to assume that they view the world through a lot of the very same lenses you do. They want a lot of the same things you do. We really want to participate in the community. We want to play the sports that Americans play. We want to participate in all of these things. We want to share them with everyone, while at the same time bringing our own cultural identity to the table, and really being able to contribute to it, and help it move forward the way that other cultures do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point maybe for us to wrap on, is the idea that, we as USTA Florida, we're all one community here. We're all USTA Florida. And so I like, a lot of what you said, Carlos, is sort of we're all part of the fabric here of Florida tennis. And that if we could continue to sort of highlight the fabric of Florida tennis and how, really diverse its weave is, all the different threads that make it up. Who are the ambassadors and where do they come from? And really showcase these are all part of the whole, and you are part of this community too. I think that's the end state we want to get to, is to say that, our culture here in Florida is very, very multifaceted, but it's also very welcoming. And that, anybody from anywhere can be part of this community. You are part of this community, and we're happy to welcome you in at any time. So you two are phenomenal representatives of that. I thank you both for joining me today, and I also would like to thank you for the different roles that you play in our success each and every day. We're very blessed to have you, and I also am very proud to celebrate both of you as we kick off Hispanic Heritage Month. So thank you both.
Thank you, Laura. The pleasure and honor is mine, and everything that we do together just comes to demonstrate that we actually on a mission to make the better world by providing tennis and vehicles for people to come together. So thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you for having me, Laura. I really do appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to work with your team, with you and your team every single day, as you strive to continue to make tennis great.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of the Here to Serve podcast. For additional information and to check out the highlights from Hispanic Heritage Month, please be sure to visit USTA Florida's website and all of our social media channels for the next month, where we lift up the members of our community who have Hispanic heritage throughout the month. And of course, if you would like to be featured on one of our profiles, please reach out to us at any time. We would love to hear your story and share it with our community. For all future episodes of the Here to Serve podcast, including upcoming topics and dates, be sure to visit ustaflorida.com/here to serve. Thank you all for tuning in, and have a wonderful rest of your day.